The most expensive real estate on Earth isn't in Manhattan or Monaco. It's a patch of polyester about the size of your hand, sitting right in the middle of a football shirt. And in elite football, that patch can rent for something like $100 million a year. But that number alone is misleading. It sounds like someone overpaying for fabric. What they're actually buying is not cloth. It's attention at planetary scale. Start with the basic math of visibility. A top European club in competitions like the Premier League or the UEFA Champions League isn't just watched in one country at one time slot. It's broadcast into hundreds of territories, replayed endlessly, clipped into highlights, turned into memes, stitched into TikToks, and embedded into video games like FIFA/EA Sports FC. A single match becomes a rolling media event that doesn't really expire. Now multiply that by a season, then multiply that by fandom. We're no longer talking about viewers, we're talking about repeated emotional exposure. People don't just see the shirt once, they see it during peak emotional moments: goals, defeats, title races, relegation battles, rivalries that last generations. That emotional intensity is what traditional advertising cannot manufacture, no matter how much it spends. And then comes the weirdest part. People voluntarily wear the ad. No other medium in human history does this. Nobody buys a billboard and walks around wearing it out of loyalty. But football fans do exactly that. They pay retail prices, sometimes over $100, to turn themselves into moving advertisements for a brand they may not even consciously think about. Marketers don't call that reach. They call it conversion of identity. That's why the shirt isn't one asset. It's a stacked portfolio of assets stitched into one uniform. The most valuable layer is the front of shirt sponsor. This is the penthouse position, the logo that sits at the center of global broadcast shots, repeated every time the camera cuts to a celebration, a substitution, a replay. At the elite end, this slot can command tens of millions annually, and for the most globally dominant clubs, it can push toward the nine-figure range. But the shirt has been quietly subdivided over time. The sleeve sponsorship, introduced widely in the mid-2010s, turned what used to be empty space into another monetized surface. It's smaller, but it appears constantly in close-ups, celebrations, and slow-motion replays. That's tens of millions more. Then there's training kit sponsorship, often overlooked but arguably more frequent in daily exposure than match kits themselves. Training ground content is now a media genre of its own. Behind-the-scenes videos, warm-ups, pre-match walkthroughs, all branded. And this is before we even talk about stadium naming rights, digital perimeter boards, or academy branding. A modern elite club isn't selling one sponsor slot. It's selling a vertical stack of visibility across every physical and digital touchpoint. So the shirt becomes less like clothing and more like a zoning map of attention. Now add the second engine, the kit manufacturer. Brands like Nike and Adidas don't just supply jerseys, they effectively co-own the commercial output of a club's image. These deals often combine fixed annual payments with performance-based royalties, especially tied to replica shirt sales. And replica shirts are not a side market. They are a global consumer economy. Top clubs can sell millions of shirts per season. But here's the nuance people miss. Shirt sales rarely fund transfers directly. The revenue doesn't flow cleanly back to player acquisition budgets in a one-to-one way. Instead, the real value is strategic. A superstar signing doesn't just generate shirt sales, he increases the future value of the next manufacturer contract. The player becomes leverage in negotiations with the kit partner. In other words, the player is not a product that pays for itself. He is a signal that reprices the entire system around him. So why do brands pay such extreme prices for a rectangle of fabric? Because they are not buying football. They are buying distribution. The typical sponsor profile tells the story clearly. Airlines, telecoms, banking giants, tech platforms, and increasingly sovereign wealth-linked entities. These are organizations that sell across borders. Their ideal customer is not in one city. Their customer is everywhere at once. Football is one of the few media ecosystems that actually matches that geometry. A club shirt appearing in Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas simultaneously gives a brand something close to global advertising synchronization. Not segmented campaigns, not regional media buys. One symbol, everywhere. And there is an additional layer that makes football uniquely powerful: legitimacy transfer. If a relatively unknown brand appears on a globally respected club's shirt, it inherits a fraction of that club's credibility. That is why emerging companies, and in some cases state-backed entities, treat shirt sponsorship as a shortcut into global recognition. It compresses decades of brand building into a single contract cycle. Critics sometimes describe this as attention laundering, the transformation of sporting prestige into commercial acceptance. That tension is part of why regulators have intervened in certain cases, particularly around gambling sponsorships in various leagues, where concerns about social impact eventually outweighed advertising value. Because the shirt is not neutral, it is persuasive infrastructure. Does it actually work? The data suggests yes, but not in a simple way. Brand awareness rises almost immediately after a major sponsorship launch. Search interest spikes. Market recognition increases in regions where the club has strong broadcast penetration. Airlines, for example, have reported measurable brand lift in countries where they have minimal operational presence but strong football exposure. But there is a catch that marketers live with constantly. Football is emotionally volatile. Unlike a controlled advertising campaign, a shirt sponsor is attached to performance outcomes they do not control. The same logo that appears during a trophy lift will also appear during humiliating defeats, managerial sackings, and injury crises. The brand does not just borrow success, it absorbs instability. This is why modern contracts are increasingly complex. They include clauses tied to competition qualification, relegation scenarios, performance thresholds, and even reputational safeguards. The shirt deal is no longer just a sponsorship. It is a risk-sharing agreement with a sports team's emotional volatility. And then there is the structural reason prices keep rising: scarcity. There are only a few dozen clubs worldwide with truly global reach. Not regional fame, global cultural penetration. Each of those clubs has exactly one front of shirt position, one sleeve, one primary kit deal. Meanwhile, the number of companies competing for global attention is growing every year. Fixed supply, expanding demand. That alone would push prices upward over time. But football adds something more: compounding visibility. Success today increases audience tomorrow. Tomorrow's audience increases sponsor value next year. It is a feedback loop that turns sporting performance into advertising inflation. And so the shirt becomes something unusual in economics. A physical object whose value is determined almost entirely by intangible attention flows. To understand it properly, you have to stop seeing it as clothing. It is not a shirt, it is a media channel that happens to be wearable, a broadcast surface that moves through stadiums, cities, and continents. A tiny billboard with a global distribution network built in. And that's why the pricing looks absurd from the outside, but rational from the inside. Because when millions of people watch a moment of joy, heartbreak, or triumph, and your logo is sitting at the center of it, you are not renting fabric. You are renting memory. And memory, once scaled across a global audience, is one of the most expensive commodities in the world. The interesting part is that this is only one revenue stream in the modern football economy. Matchday income, broadcast rights, and commercial deals all interlock, and in some cases, matchday earnings can be just as revealing about the business model behind the sport as the shirt itself. But that's a different layer of the machine. The shirt is one revenue stream, matchday is another, and what a single game earns will surprise you. That's next. Subscribe.